Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for this CCTF technical exchange on timescale algorithms, basics to applications. This afternoon, we're going to have the pleasure of hearing from our instructor, Yuko Hanado, formerly from NICT. Yuko was engaged in working to generate and maintain Japan's standard time for more than 20 years. At the NICT, her field of research was averaged atomic timescales. I'd just like to mention that this CCTF technical exchange is based on an e-learning course that was developed at the BIPM by Yuko. That course will become available on the e-learning page in the coming weeks. So stay tuned for that. Additionally, this CCTF technical exchange is going to run in two parts. So Yuko is going to begin by giving us a tutorial on timescale averaging, everything from why it's important to how to do it, as well as some of the applications. And then the second part of this technical exchange will be a guided demonstration of some web-based tools developed by Yuko. And so hopefully you received an email with both the Python scripts as well as some of the data to follow along with her. I just want to make sure that everybody's hearing me. Is everybody hearing me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So with that, I'd like to...
Loud and clear.
Okay, perfectly. I'd like to introduce and have Yuko join us. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that she can share her presentation.
Thank you, Tyler. So I will upload my PowerPoint file.
Also, Yuko has told me that she would prefer to answer questions via email. I'm going to add my email to the chat. So if there are any questions that come up, I will, if you can send me an email, I will send those requests to Yuko and she can answer them to you. So here we go.
Can you hear my screen?
Yes.
Is it correct? Is it correct mode? Okay.
Yes, it's perfect.
Okay. Then let's start my talk. Thank you very much for Tala, and hello everyone. This tutorial lecture is about a timescale algorithm from basics to applications. The purpose of this tutorial is to understand the outline of what the averaged atomic timescale T is, what its characteristics are, how to calculate it, and how to use it. Hereafter, I will use the word TA as the averaged atomic timescale, that is, making TA is averaging many clocks to construct one virtual clock. Here are the contents. Section 1 is an introduction that explains the concept and the need for TA. Section 2, the main part of this lecture, provides a detailed explanation of the actual calculation methods of TA. And Section 3, the realization method of TA and its application are presented for practical use. Finally, summary and the information on related Python tools are provided. Then, let's begin with the first section. Why do we make an averaged atomic timescale TA? Now, let's start from a very basic question. How can we measure the flow of time? The answer is simple, that measure the time by counting regularly repeated phenomena. This repeating cycle becomes the scale of the ruler that measures the length of time. A stable frequency oscillator makes a stable clock. In the past, the movement of the sun, namely the rotation of the Earth, was used to measure time. However, observation progress has revealed that the length of a day is not so constant. Then, currently, the length of 1 second is determined by a more rigorous definition. Specifically, it is defined using the transition frequency of the cesium atom. Here, we might think, is one high-accuracy cesium atomic clock enough? However, the answer is no. This is because any atomic clock has individual fluctuation and limited lifetime. This is the destiny of any device. This photo shows the components of the cesium atomic clock. Atomic clocks are precision devices containing an atomic sample, an oscillator to excite the atomic resonance, and electronic control circuits. Instability and offsets on the output frequency are caused by environmental perturbations such as pressure, temperature, and vibrations. In addition, the time of this clock will stop as the device ends its lifetime. So, how can we achieve highly stable and continuous atomic time? One solution is averaged atomic time, TA. Averaging many clocks to construct one virtual clock is a possible solution to the instrumental difference and the finite life of each clock. TA has several strong points. For example, individual deviations of clocks are smoothed out by averaging effect. The effect of a degrading clock can be removed by replacing it with the good ones. The more clocks in averaging, the less impact from clocks going in and out. In addition, the time scale does not stop if at least one clock is alive in averaging. That is, we can make a robust and continuous time by using this method. However, we should keep in mind some consideration points for using TA properly and effectively. For example, calculation using an external reference time is required for accuracy. This is because the clock average is stable and robust, but accuracy is not guaranteed. In addition, clock anomaly detection and exclusion are necessary to maintain quality. If clock anomalies are not detected and treated properly, the averaged result will degrade. And the proper algorithms should be applied to achieve the desired outcome. By addressing these points, we can obtain a high-performance TA. I would also like to add some notes for making TA. The first point is about TA as the basis for UTC and UTCK. Proper algorithms depend on the properties of the targeted timescale. In UTC, frequent updating is not required as its priority is to keep long-term stability and reliability, so monthly updating is enough. For UTCK, however, updates should be closer to real time to be useful in daily life. Although these algorithms are based on the same principle, their details are different. The next point is that the aim of TA is to achieve high-frequency stability. Usually, long-term stability is required in TA. Please note that the accuracy is not the primary concern. For evaluating the stability, several variances can be used as performance indicator. Enhancing robustness is also important to making TA. The point is how it can maintain quality even if various unexpected conditions. Now that we can understand the effectiveness and the characteristics of TA, then let's move on to section 2, calculation of TA. In the first section 2.1, let's start from getting a basic image of how to compute TA, then formulate TA by basic averaging. To begin with, I'd like to mention again that to make an average atomic time means constructing a virtual clock by averaging many atomic clocks. Let's examine what and how to get this virtual clock for achieving a good TA. Firstly, let's set some preconditions. Here, we have several clocks. Each atomic clock generates almost stable output signals. For example, 1 second signal, 10 MHz sine wave, etc. However, the clock's frequencies are not exactly the same. They show fluctuation. Assume that there is a stable and reliable clock which can be used as a reference time. In this figure, this clock S marked with a red star is the reference clock. And the time difference large X of all clocks versus reference clock can be measured simultaneously. Based on these preconditions, let's proceed with the discussion. The upper right figure shows the comparison of large X values. Some clock is stable and some one is not. Here comes an idea, that is, averaging the fluctuating time deviation of each clock can make a smooth and stable timescale. The lower right figure shows the result. A virtual averaged clock can generate a stable timescale. In this example, each clock is said to be the equal weight, so A plus B plus C divided 3 becomes the virtual averaged clock. Here, please note that reference clock should be as stable as possible. If the reference clock S is unstable, averaging does not effective. Usually, UTCK or the most stable clock is used for the reference. Then, let's generalize the above considerations and lead a formulation. Specifically, let's introduce the concept of ideal time, as the perfectly accurate reference time, and the time difference h from this ideal time. We can simply replace large X on the previous page with h, so that the TA is obtained as a weighted average of h. Then this is a formulation of TA by basic averaging, named TAB hereafter. Here, W is the normalized weight. This parameter is very important in a TA calculation. Proper weighting of the atomic clocks makes the TA smoother than each individual clock. TAB is very simple and useful to understand, but there are several consideration points for practical use. One problem is ensuring continuity. When the composition of clock ensemble changes, TAB tends to show a gap. We will see it in a test case later. There is also a restriction that TAB needs a stable external reference time. For the actual calculation, a usable reference time is required instead of the conceptual ideal time. If no stable reference time is available, TAB cannot be stable. For such problems, TA with prediction, a more advanced TA, provides a solution. It can suppress a negative effect when the ensemble clocks change, and it can maintain stability by itself without external reference time. Then, let's see what is TA with prediction. In short, TA with prediction is the weighted average of the residuals, which are the differences between the predicted and the actual phases of atomic clock. In the first place, the purpose of TA is to smooth out the random fluctuations of clocks. If so, it should also be effective to average the unmodeled errors after removing the predictable offset. This is the basic idea of TA with prediction. As the famous example, the timescale EAL, which is the base of International Atomic Time TAI, is the kind of the TA with prediction. TA with prediction is formulated as equation 3 and named TAP hereafter. This is similar with the equation of TAB, except for this part. Here, WI is the weight of clock I. HI is the time difference of clock I versus ideal time. Small xi is the time difference of clock I versus TAP. And small x hat I is a prediction of small xi. Please note the basis of small x is the TA itself, not ideal time. Here, I would like to mention about what the equation 3 means. From the equation 3 and the right figure, we can find that TAP is the accumulation of epsilon, which is the difference between predicted and real. Let's confirm this step by step. From the figure, we can confirm that TAP at T0 plus X hat at T1 is equal to H at T1 plus epsilon at T1. This is the equation 3. From the above equation, we can find that TAP minus epsilon is equal to H minus X hat. Then this part can be replaced like this. TAP can be placed outside the sigma, and the sum of the weights is equal to 1. Thus, the equation becomes like this. In this equation, TAP at Tk is expressed using the previous TAP. Then, next equation becomes like this. Repeating this process until the initial time, equation 7 is derived. It shows that TAP is the weighted accumulation of epsilon. TA with prediction has several merits. One is continuity. Even if the composition of the clock ensemble changes, the impact is smaller than that of TAB. Then continuity of the time scale can be maintained. This can be better understood with the following example. If clock 1 exits the ensemble after T1, a large gap will occur in TAB due to the offset H1. In the case of TAP, however, the effect can be smaller because the residual epsilon1 is smaller than H1. Another merit is no need of external reference time for calculating TAP. As TAP refers to its own past values, no external reference time is required for the calculation, except at the starting of the calculation. However, if accuracy is required, TA requires calculation with an external reference. These were the outline of TA with prediction. Then let's see the details of calculation. When starting the calculation, you may encounter a problem. That is, the numerical value of TAP cannot be obtained because the value of H is unknown. To be honest, when I started learning of this field, I imagined that the TA calculation was used to obtain the TA values like this. However, since the ideal time is conceptual, HI value cannot be obtained as a numerical value. Then, how can we calculate TAP? This problem is solved by transforming the equation, more specifically, by introducing the measurement values into the equation. Here, parameter large X is introduced. Large X is actually measured time difference between two clocks. Using equation 8 and the small xi defined as equation 5, equation 3 is modified to become equation 9. Please confirm the process here. This is the equation that is added minus hs to the both sides of equation 3. Then, by reversing the terms and using equation 8, the equation becomes like this. Lastly, the left side is replaced x using equation 5 again. Then equation 9 is obtained. Here, let's summarize the essential points. According to the definition of equation 5, TAP is equal to h minus x. That is, TAP can be defined as a time shifted by x small x from the time of clock I. In addition, equation 9 shows that the small x can be obtained from the measurement values and the calculable values. There is no conceptual value such as TA or H in this equation. In fact, the algorithm of TAP is a procedure that computes the time series of small x. Although equation 9 was derived mathematically, its physical meaning can also be understood from this figure. However, it may require further explanation, so please refer to the interpretation of equation 9 in Appendix 1. This is a summary of practical equations to calculate x. The main equation is equation 9, which is used to calculate the small x value of clock S. On the right hand side, x hat I is a prediction of clock I, and large XIS is a measured time difference of clock I and clock S. X hat I is obtained using equation 10. Here, Y hat I is the prediction rate of clock I. The details of Y hat I will be mentioned again later. The small xi of each clock is easily obtained from small xs and measured large xis by equation 11. These x values of each clock are used in the next calculation. In this way, iterative calculation provides a time series of small xi series. This diagram shows this iterative calculation process. At the beginning of the calculation, there is no past TAP and X values, so we need to prepare a substitution to start a calculation. UTCK, for example, is used as the initial reference time instead of the past TAP. Once the calculation has started, regularly measure the time difference of the clocks and the storage of past small x data generates the time series of small x, that is TAP. So far, we have seen the basics of how to calculate TA. Now, let's look at the important parameters, the predicted clock rate Y hat and the weight W. This is a basic expression of a predicted clock rate Y hat for the trending. It is estimated at the latest interval of T rate. As for the weight, it is basically proportional to the stability evaluated from the past X values. Please note that both parameters are calculated from the past X values, which means TAP itself becomes the reference. Proper calculation of the trending and weighting depends on the situation, for example, properties of clocks, priorities in the design of TAP, etc. Further examples are provided in the next slides. This slide shows the variation of the trending. Here are 3 examples of clock behavior. The left figure shows the frequency trend, and the right one shows the trend in time region. In case A, there is only a time offset, so the trending is not necessary. In case B, there is a time shift due to a clock rate, so linear fit in time region is adopted. In case C, there is a time shift caused by a frequency drift, so quadratic fit in time region is required. In this way, the best way to the trend depends on the clock behavior. If the trend is unclear, it's useful to examine the results while adjusting the trend degree and parameters. Next slide is about the optimizing of weighting. Clock weight is basically proportional to stability, that is, inversely proportional to the variance of past X values. For the stability, classical variance, alarm variance, prediction error, etc. are used. In some cases, equal weighting may be the best option. The proper weighting depends on the purpose. In this case, clock one has better short-term stability, and clock 2 has better long-term stability. If we need a short-term stability in the objective timescale, clock 1 should be given a higher weighting than clock 2. If the clock behavior is not constant, a dynamic weighting is effective. In this case, clock 1 is more stable than clock 2 at first, but it comes worse later. Proper dynamic weighting automatically sets the best weights throughout the calculation. If such dynamic weighting is adopted, setting a maximum limit is really important. TA is autoregressive, so once a weight is concentrated on a specific clock, this tendency may be accelerated. This would undermine the advantage of TA. Setting a maximum limit can prevent too much concentration on particular clocks. In this way, the best setting on the parameters is not unique and will vary depending on the situation. So, please try out various cases using the tutorial Python program. So far, we have learned that we can indirectly obtain TAP through small xi. However, small x is not the TAP itself. How can we evaluate TAP? For this purpose, the time difference against an external reference time, such as UTC-K, is usually used. Actually, UTC-K minus TAP becomes calculable by dividing it into the following two terms. The first one is measured time difference between UTC-K and the clock, and another is the calculated small xi values. Using this relation, a comparison of TAB and TAP is introduced next. This slide shows the examples of TAB minus UTC-K and TAP minus UTC-K. By using a common reference, the behavior of TAB and TAP can be compared. Figure 1 shows TAB and Figure 2 shows TAP. Both tiers are the averages of the same clocks with fixed equal weights. Plot A is the time difference versus UTC-K, and plot B is the error deviation of plot A. In TAP, each clock rate was daily calculated from the latest 30 days. In this case, the clock 1 data is missing from the middle. As a result, TAB in black line shows a large gap in this figure, but there is no apparent jump in TAP in figure 2. In the plot of error deviation, TAP shows better stability than each clock, while TAB has degraded due to the anomaly. In this way, we can evaluate the TA behavior using the comparison with other common reference time. Lastly, I'd like to mention about some important notes about TAP. At first, let me emphasize again that the reference time for the calculation is TAP itself. This is reasonable because we consider the most stable time scale to be TAP. However, It also suggests a risk of self-divergence within the process. Next, TAP cannot be obtained in real time. The time we can obtain TAP at TK should also always be later than TK. Next, there is a hidden assumption in the calculation. The assumption is that the current clock status can be roughly predicted based on its past behavior, and that the fluctuations after excluding this predicted trend can be smoothed out by averaging. In other words, there is no guarantee that TA will be stable when this assumption does not hold. The last one is about the initial phase and frequency offsets of TA compared to the reference. Since these initial offsets do not affect the stability, they can be set arbitrarily. They are also preserved throughout the calculation. Please keep in mind these characteristics to understand and utilize the TA properly. So far, we have learned about the principles and the calculation method of TA. Then, let's move on to Section 3, Realization of TA and its application. In the previous sections, we learned that TA can provide highly stable and continuous timescale. However, since TA itself is only a numerical time, some consideration is required to use it like a physical clock. In the first part of this section, I will explain how to implement the calculated TA for practical use. First, let's take a brief look at the motivation. Actual clocks in daily life tend to drift, so adjustment to an external reference time are necessary. This reference time can be obtained using the UTC time code from satellites or a stable atomic clock. TA can be also an option. As demonstrated, TA has many advantages and shows potential as a reference time. However, TA itself is numerical data, so physical realization of TA is required for practical use. TA realization is possible using the following system. Here, we assume that the TA has already been calculated using a clock ensemble including clock A. First, we should prepare a microphase stepper called MPS, which shifts the external input phase and frequency. Then, let's connect this MPS to clock A, which is a component of the TA calculation. Clock A has a time offset small x, XA versus TA. This value is given in the TA calculation. If MPS compensates for this offset small xa, TA is realized as the output signal of the MPS. Let's look at the details of the compensation process referring to this diagram. The concept principle is shown in Figure 1. The black line shows clock A, and the green line shows the MPS, which follows clock A if no adjustment. Here assume that the TA at T1 has been calculated. In Figure 1, the adjustment is done at T1, and the MPS simply compensates for the offset 𝑥A. However, it's not realistic because there is usually a time lag in adjustments, and the moderate adjustments are better for stability. In practice, as shown in Figure 2, MPS aims to synchronize at T2. For that, MPS must compensate not only small xa, but also the time shift due to the rate of clock A versus TA. Then let's formulate this process. As shown on the previous page, the initial adjustment frequency delta y given to MPS at T1 is calculated using this delta phi. Here, delta phi compensates for the time difference of clock A versus TA and the time shift caused by the frequency difference of clock A versus TA. Such a frequency adjustment to trace TA is called steering. As you can see, proper prediction of the time difference at the future time T2 is so important. Next, let's see how to continue the steering of MPS. After the first adjustment, TA is realized as the output of MPS. The target of the next steering at T2 is to synchronize MPS with TA at T3, future time T3. I plotted 3 cases with different adjustments at T2. The first one is a case with no adjustment to MPS. In this case, MPS will follow the move of clock A with a phase offset on delta phi. The second case is the result with only an adjustment for the shift due to the rate of clock A. The third case is the desired one. The adjustment frequency delta y is almost the same as the first adjustment, except for this small x MPS. Small x MPS can be obtained by using the measurable difference between the clock A and the MPS. Please refer Appendix 2 for generalization of further steering. Here, I would like to mention about a technical but very important notice. If adjustment frequency is added to the external reference frequency of MPS, delta y should be given. However, if adjustment frequency should be added to the current frequency of MPS, you should give the difference value from the previous adjustment. This depends on the operation mode, so please confirm the user manual of MPS. So far, we have considered the case where clock A is a component clock of the TA calculation. Then, how about the case if clock A is not included in the TA calculation? Even though in such a case, if clock A can be regularly compared with a clock in the TA ensemble, MPS can output the realized TA. The steering equation in that case are easily derived using the following relation, and please see the right Figure 2. In order to compare clock A with the TA component clocks correctly, simultaneous measurement of all clocks is required. The following is a good application of using this method. If a clock with high short-term stability, for example hydrogen maser, is used as clock A, the output of MPS can achieve both the short-term stability of clock A and the long-term stability of TA. Here are some additional notes for the steering. First, it is recommended that steering is applied to MPS, not directly to the clock in the ensemble of TA calculation. If the adjustment is directly applied to clock A, the prediction of the true rate of clock A becomes difficult. Next, please keep in mind that steering is also a kind of disturbance. Stronger adjustments can lead to faster synchronization, but they also cause larger frequency noise. So, proper steering should be adopted depending on the purpose and the situation. The last point is that a simple method is enough in some cases. For example, voltaic fitting is usually appropriate if an hydrogen maser is used as clock A. However, a simple linear fitting is enough if we adopt a short-term prediction interval. Then let's move on to the final section, which is about multiplexing of TA operations as an example of application. The concept of multiplexing TA generation can be easily derived from the following considerations. TA calculation requires the comparison data between clocks. Basically, the clocks installed in the same place are used for this comparison. However, clocks located at the distant stations can also join the TA calculation if such a mutual comparison is feasible. And this condition is the same for any station. That is, every station can calculate TA if mutual clock comparison data can be shared each other. This is the concept of multiplexing data TA generation. The following is a practical operation process. Now, for example, let's assume 3 geographically separated stations that are linked with satellites or optical fiber. Initially, each station compares its own clock to those of its own and other stations. All stations share the common clock data by exchanging the comparison data with each other. Then, each station independently calculates TA using all clock data. All TAs are expected to be of a similar quality. They are regularly compared to each other for monitoring purpose. Please note that each TA is not exactly the same because the comparison data with remote clocks includes transfer noise. This system has a remarkable merit in terms of redundancy for TA generation, that is, the enhancement of robustness. Here, let station A be the usual master station. Even if the clock data at station A cannot be obtained, TA at station A can still be calculated using the clock data at station B and station C. If station A stops working and cannot calculate TA, station B or station C can assume the role of the master station because they are keeping the almost same TA with station A. Even in such an emergency, seamless switching of the master station is possible if all the necessary data has been shared in advance. In this way, multiplexing of TA generation can be enhanced robustness to physical accidents. Another merit of this system is the enhancement of accessibility. If a TA realization system is also installed, this remote station will have the ability to provide TA on its own. This indicates that even a station with a few clocks can provide TA if its realization system is connected to a clock included in TA calculation. Expanding the TA providing station in this way enhances operational robustness and user accessibility. Here, please note that getting time from a distant station may be affected by delays in the transmission line. Such delays must be calculated and compensated for if necessary. Then, summary for all sections and related information. For section 1, the introduction, TA is a time scale of a virtual clock by averaging many atomic clocks. TA gives a solution to instrumental weakness and finite life of physical clock. TA aims frequency stability and continuity. The accuracy is not the primary concern. Take the consideration points into account for proper and effective use. For example, calculation for accuracy if needed, anomaly detection, and proper algorithm. Especially, clock anomaly detection in advance is so important to obtain the original quality of TA. For section 2, the calculation of TA, the basic principle of TA is that averaging the fluctuating time deviation of each clock makes a smooth and stable time scale. First, the most basic form TA by basic averaging was considered. While TAB is useful for understanding the concept of TA, it is not enough for actual use. For a more advanced and practical approach, TA with prediction was introduced. TAP provides a robust, continuous, and highly stable atomic timescale. TA with prediction is defined as equation 3. It means that TAP is the accumulation of prediction errors of clocks. As equation 3 is not calculable due to the conceptual parameters, TAP is obtained via the parameter xi. Xi is the time difference between each clock and the TAP. In other words, TAP can be defined as the time shifted by xi from the time of clock I. The practical TAP algorithm is the procedure for computing the time series of xi. The calculation of time series of xi is iterative. These equations consist of measurable values and calculable values from the previous calculation. Above also means that the TAP refers to its own past values. At the start of the calculation only, an external reference time, for example UTC-K, is required instead of the past TAP. The appropriate parameters depend on the target or situation of the calculation. Clock rate estimation and weighting should be optimized according to the condition of the clocks. And the following is so important. TA algorithm is not unique and includes the possibility of modification. The example used in this lecture is just a basic one. There are variations in the actual used algorithms. Please understand the principle well and find the best way of calculation. For section 3, the realization of TA, as for the principle of the realization, the numerical TA is realized at the output of microphase stepper driven by a frequency from clock A that is included or linked with the TA calculation. MPS is continuously adjusted to compensate for the time difference between clock A and TA, so that the MPS output signal will trace TA. This adjustment parameter includes both frequency and the phase offset components. This adjustment cannot be made in real time, so the process includes a prediction. And as the advanced application, multiple of TA generation at the remote stations. By sharing the clock comparison data, remote stations can generate TA with almost the same quality in parallel. This system improves both the robustness of TA generation and the accessibility for users. For practical learning of the contents of this lecture, you can use the following tutorial Python tools. TA-Gen Basic Pi is for TAB by basic averaging. This is good for the first item to learn the principle of how to calculate TA and the role of parameters. We will use this program for the following training session. TA-Gen Pi is for TAP with daily prediction and fixed weights. To learn step by step the process of making a TA with prediction, this program adopts fixed weighting. You can investigate how the TA changes by various combinations of clocks, parameters for the prediction, and initial weights for each clock. TA-Gen AutoPy is for TAP with daily prediction and dynamical weighting. This program is almost the same as TA-Gen Pi, except that it adopts a dynamical weighting that is inversely proportional to the alarm variance of each clock. In TA-Gen Pi, the weights are fixed so that the automatic optimization function, a major advantage of TA, is not enough. In contrast, TA-Gen AutoPy optimizes TA using dynamical weighting according to the clock stability renewed at every calculation. This TA is very practical and you can find several important attention points here. Detailed explanations are denoted in user manuals. Please check them. And as for the references, 1 and 2 are very nice textbook to learn about atomic timescale. Especially, 1 includes deep explanation not only the atomic timescale, but also astronomical timescale, which are so important to understand overall pictures of time. The reference 3 clearly shows a principle of TA through the practical explanation of 2 major algorithms. My lecture may be not enough, so please learn using these references. Then that's all of my talk, and thank you very much for your kind attention. Please also try to do the actual calculations using Python tools to learn more about the TA. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Yuko. Yuko will be following up with this with a second presentation. It will be a live demonstration of some of her tools, these Python tools that she's been speaking about. We're going to have her start that presentation pretty shortly. But if there are any people who have some questions in the chat, You can put them in the chat. We have some experts, Patricia Tavella, who can help to answer some questions on the fly, just to make sure that nobody's lost, or if you're having a hard time finding some of the information like the scripts, I'm happy to answer you. So please communicate with us in the chat. Yuko, are you ready to begin the second portion of your presentation?
If possible, a short break.
Okay.
Okay.
How many minutes would you like?
3 minutes, okay.
Okay, so everybody, let's take a 3-minute break. Grab yourself a cup of coffee, a glass of water, and we'll be back in 3 minutes. Hi, Yuko. Welcome back.
Okay.
So Yuko is going to start the second portion of her presentation, a guided demonstration of some of her Python modules. For any of you who have not received that information by email, I put a link in the chat to GitHub where you can get access not only currently to her Python modules, but also to some of the manuals she described, as well as her PowerPoint presentation. So that should be at the top of the chat. Okay, Yuko, right now I'm seeing that in presenter mode.
Okay. Is that okay?
That's very good.
Okay. Then let's start the training session. Okay. This session is about the training for timescale algorithm for basics to applications. The purpose of this training is as follows. Firstly, it's to learn how to use the Python program 𝐻𝐿 Here, 𝐻𝐿 is a simulation tool for TAB. TAB is TA by basic averaging, which is the most primitive form of TA. And next, to get familiar with 𝐻𝐿 through self-exercise, and then to understand how TAB changes depending on calculation conditions. I think you already got everything to use the Python programs. If not yet, please do that in the later exercise time. This is the contents. First one is the overview of the training. Next is a practical explanation of how to use the program. After that, let's try some self-exercise. Then let's start from the overview of the training. What we want to do in this training is calculating TAB using the actual clock data and evaluate its quality. Let's see the formula of TAB. In this equation, the letter H is used to represent the time difference between clock I and the ideal time. Ideal time is a conceptual time, so we cannot get the value of H. We learned it in the tutorial lecture time. Then, to evaluate TAB, we use the following relation, that is, a comparison with UTC-K. UTC-K minus H is a measurable value, so we can calculate the value of UTC-K minus TAB. This is to be done with 𝐻𝐿. 𝐻𝐿 is a simulation tool used for making TAB, which is a basic weighted average of atomic clocks. It reads the clock data UTC-K minus clocks, calculate their averaging using the given starting weights, and displays the results of the UTC-K minus TAB and its alarm deviation. You can find further information about the TAB principle in the tutorial lecture reference to and about the program in the user's manual reference-free. The training process using the Python program is as follows. First, prepare the actual clock data and parameter files as detailed in section 2.1 and appendix 1. Next, calculate TA using 𝐻𝐿 as detailed in section 2.2. Then, check the output result in section 2.3. This process is repeated as changing the clock data or parameters. Section 3 is for this exercise. Then, let's move on to section 2, how to use a 𝐻𝐿. The first step is preparation. Firstly, please install Python on your computer. Next, download all the materials from the BIPM site provided in reference 1. All the directories and files should be copied correctly as in the right figure. This one. If you unzip the file attached in the reminder email, these constructions should be correctly copied. Please do not change the names of the directories under pytool_TA_gen and the file names of clock file list text and param list text. Lastly, check the execution of the program. Further information on the preparation is provided in Appendix 1. Here, I will explain the details of clock data files and parameter files on the next few pages. Firstly, regarding the clock data, when you download the materials, example clock data for UTC-K-clocks are copied to the data clock directory. The rules for the data file are as follows. One clock data is for one data file. File name should be UTC-K-4 characters .dat. The 4 characters are used to identify the clocks. The first column is the observation timestamp, and the second column is the measured time difference of UTC-K-clock. The unit is second. Here, interval of the first column should be specified in the parameter file param list text. In this case, the timestamp is MJD, the modified Julian day, so the interval must be 86,400. For the program to run normally, this sampling interval must be constant and continuous. The parameter file clock file list text provides the conditions of each clock in the averaging process. The line starting with hashtag is ignored. First column is file number. Second column is data file name. The third column is the weight in the averaging. And the fourth column is flag 1, which is ignored in this program. Each weight is normalized in the averaging. The parameter file param list text provides the parameters in advance. The text after hashtag provides the explanation of the parameter. The parameter t-interval is the interval of timestamp mentioned in the previous page. If the clock data is changed and the timestamp interval is also changed, This t-interval parameter should be adjusted accordingly. If the wrong value is given to this parameter, the alarm deviation cannot be calculated correctly. Then let's move on to the calculation, the essential part of this training. During this section, the left side of the slide provides an explanation of the operation, while the right side displays what the program is doing as it runs. When the 𝐻𝐭 runs, initial processing is performed. First, it reads the measured UTC-K- clock listed in the parameter file, clock file list text. In this process, all the clock data files are read except those with hashtag at the beginning of the line. Next, program plots all the raw data of UTC-K-clock to confirm the condition of each clock data. Left figure shows the time difference of UTC-K-clock, and the right one shows the alarm deviation of the data in the left figure. Alarm deviation is calculated by Python library alarm tools. If the data is discontinuous and divided into several blocks, the alarm deviation is plotted for each block and marked with *1 or *2. For example, in this plot, clock 2 in orange line has a jump and splits into 2 blocks. Then there are 2 alarm deviations plottings. The worst one corresponds to the first block, and the better one is to the second block. At last, the query to save the results is displayed, then input Y if necessary. Full results are saved under this directory with a timestamp at the data saving. Long text is a history of your process. Big PDF is both figures. All raw clock data is a data plotted in the left figure, and all ADIF data is the either alarm deviations. Here, the timestamp of the operation is added to each directory and file name. Here, let's look over the output files. This slide is also provided in Appendix 2. All raw clock data is one of the output files and contains the combined data of all UTC clock except the clock marked with hashtag. In this case, clock 5 is ignored. The wait flag and CID are the copies from clock file list text. These UTC-K clock data are plotted in the left figure, and we can confirm the clock's behavior in this plot. All ADIF data shows the alarm deviation calculated using these clock data. MJD span indicates the data period used in this calculation. If there are enough samples, alarm deviation cannot be calculated and is expressed as none. Long text is a history of the operation processes. The selected menu processes are added in sequence until the program is exited or menu 0 is selected. Then let's go back to the explanation of the operation. Next is the selection of the processing menu. Menu 0 is the same as initial processing. It is to read all the data assigned in clock file list text and plot the time differences versus UTCK and their alarm deviations. This operation initializes all the processing to date. Menu 1 is used to change the data range for all processes. The specified range will be used for all subsequent processing unless menu 0 is selected. Menu 2 is used to detrend the UTCK-clock data over the entire data range. It is useful to check for clock behavior masked by a linear trend. Full range detrending does not affect the stability of TA. Menu 3 is for making TA B. We will use this menu. And menu 10 is for exiting the program. Here, let's select menu 3, then the following processes will proceed. First, the program calculates the UTCK minus TAB. This is done as follows. This is the equation of TAB. Here, using the normalization of weights, this equation can be modified as the last one. That is, UTCK minus TAB is the weighted average of UTCK minus clocks. Here, W is the fixed weight given in clock file list text. And outliers beyond the X limit are removed before averaging. X limit is determined in the parameter file param list text. Next, the results of UTCK minus TAB are plotted together with the clock's results. Left figure shows UTCK minus TAB in black line and UTCK minus clocks. Middle is alarm deviation of each data of left figure, and the right one shows each clock's weight. Lastly, the query to save the data is also displayed. Let's see the results of TAB. In all low clock 𝐸 the result of UTCK minus TA is added in the last column. The weights in this all low clock 𝐸 are the given values in the clock file list text, while the weights in all weight dat are actually used in the averaging. These are the values after normalization for the available clocks. Clock 2 in orange line lost the weight during this interval, which also affected the weights of other clocks due to the normalization. In the fig PDF, TAB is plotted in a black line. It shows a jump due to the clock 2 jump, so that its alarm deviation does not reflect its intrinsic behavior. I think this is too much information to take in all at once, so please take your time to confirm it later. When the calculation is complete, the results are evaluated, and if necessary, the simulation is retried with different conditions. Next, I will show you how to change the calculation condition using some examples and introduce some basic evaluation points. This slide shows an example of the average of 3 clocks with equal weighting. This condition can be easily set using only the clock file list text, that is, by giving an equal weighting to the targeted clocks. These are the results of the comparison of TAB with each clock using the time differences from UTC-K and its alarm deviations. Usually, I check the continuity at first. In Figure 1, there were no unusual behaviors in any of the clocks of TAB. That is, clock section is okay. The next point is the frequency stability. In Figure 2, TAB shows a better alarm deviation than each of the clocks. Looking more closely, the short-term alarm deviation of TAB is approximately 1 over the square root of 3 of that of each clock. This result is reasonable considering that the alarm deviation of each clock is almost the same. Here, let's change the clock selection. In this case, clock 2, clock 4, clock 6 are selected. This time, due to anomaly of clock 2 on denoted MJDs, TAB shows a big jump and its alarm deviation was degraded. It is no good. In such a case, as a solution to avoid the anomalous event, let's try a different calculation range. In the operation menu, let's select menu 1 and input the favorite initial date and the last date separated by space. If the input values are outside the available range, re-entering is requested with an error message. Please note that this new data range will be used in any subsequent processes unless initialization is done using menu 0. Next, select menu 3 and recalculate TAB. Then, by changing the calculation range, continuous TAB was calculated. All the operation process and the setting range are confirmed in the log file. The introductory explanation is finished here. Let's move on to exercise time. At first, let's use the program to become familiar with the operation. In advance, set the parameters of clock file list text as you like. Here, don't forget to save the file after making any correction. If you use the conditions of case 1 or case 2, you can compare your results with those in the previous pages. Next, run the program and select menu 3. Please don't forget to save the results. If you update the clock file list text, you must exit the program once and then restart it. Otherwise, the previous clock file list text will remain in use. If you want to initialize the operation, select menu 0. All processes of your operation can be confirmed in the long text. Finally, confirm the output result in the TA result directory. As a little more advanced exercise, let's change the ratio of the clock weights. Please calculate the following three cases. Predict the differences between these TABs in advance. The exercise time is around 15 minutes. So if you have any questions, please use the chat message. Then please try. I will start the talk after 4 minutes.
Yeah, this is Magda.
Thomas, do you have a question?
Ah, sorry.
Okay, can I restart the talk?
Yes, please.
Okay. Then here I would like to show the result of the second exercise. These results show that TAB becomes closer to the clocks with a higher weight. Case 3 is for the equal weights. This one. In case 4, the clock 7 in orange line its weight becomes twice. So the trend and alarm deviation becomes closer to clock 7. And the case 5 is a result in reverse. It gives us the ideas to utilize TA, that is, If we want a TA with long-term stability, we can give the higher weight to the clock width and higher long-term stability. In this way, the appropriate setting of the TA parameters depends on the purpose and the situation. Then, summary and comments. As for the summary, this training aims to help participants understand the principles of TAB and how to make and evaluate it using the tutorial Python program 𝐬𝐭𝐤 BasicPy. Participants learned how to use the program through the lecture and exercise to basic operation process. Further information about the TAB and the program are provided in reference 2 and reference 3. And some comments. This 𝐬𝐭𝐤 BasicPy was developed by a beginner in Python programming. It's me. So there may be bugs or areas that are not fully developed. If we find any issues, please contact me via BIPM. If you are interested in modifying the program, please refer to the user guide reference 3, which provides information on the program's construction and flow. For the simulation of TA with prediction, an advanced form of TA, 2 more Python programs are prepared, 𝐬𝐭𝐤 and 𝐬𝐭𝐤 𝐒𝐞𝐻. They were not mentioned in this training because there was not enough time, but these programs were already included in a zip file, and the manuals will be available on the website soon. So please refer to them if you are interested. Another introductory explanations is being prepared for this. Then that's all my talk. Thank you very much for your kind attention. I also thank the BIPM people very much for their great support on this occasion. Thank you.